Good morning, I'm Dr. Tom Larkin. Welcome to the leaderboard on the Hygiene Hackers Study Club. It is my absolute pleasure this morning to introduce one of our founding faculty, Dr. Paul Henny. Dr. Henny is the steward of the Bob Barkley Study Club. And if anybody here does not know who Bob Barkley is, they're going to know. Okay, Bob Barkley's writings have been important to me as I have scoured the internet and found them here and there, and we can talk about what that's about. So Dr. Henny, tell me when this began formally, when did it form, and what's the purpose of your particular study club?
Well, when we talk about the Bob Barkley Study Club, we're kind of talking about several different entities. The kind of physical entity started about 1998 when three of us dentists were training at the Pankey Institute and had all gone through Dawson and had some experiences at places like Spear and other places. And we were still feeling like we didn't have enough information of what I would refer to as behavioral dentistry, meaning we didn't really understand how we were learning all these amazing skills, comprehensive dentistry, approaching every case, considering occlusion. Now it's airway, putting all your cases on articulators, taking people through an organized process that leads up to a case presentation where you try to explain to them everything that you see and everything that you think is appropriate. And so, what we were finding is the more we would learn, the more frustrated we would get, because the more people would essentially say no. Our treatment plans just get bigger and more expensive and more elaborate. And along the way, people would just get lost and their eyes would roll over in the back of their head. And we were reaching a point where, what's the point of learning all this stuff if we're hardly ever going to be able to do it? And in some cases, the people that were really, really hardcore about staying to their guns literally bankrupted their practice because they just refused to deviate from the set pattern that they were taught at these various places. So we were all we were all involved with dental insurance at that point. And we knew that there was a serious conflict between taking assignment of benefits and doing really holistic, more comprehensive care. So we worked together on moving dental insurance out of our practice. At the same time, we started to focus on how can we learn how to connect with people in a more effective way and help them make better decisions. That's probably the best way I can explain it. It's not about manipulation. It's not about strategies or tactics. It's about understanding how human beings think and function and feel, and how to integrate more of that into our day-to-day process. And Bob Barkley was kind of the master of all of that.
Yeah.
He started doing that in the late 60s and 70s and wrote a book about it that he published in 1972 and went into great detail about how to do this, how to set up examination processes in a way that people were much more prone to feeling safe, open to learning new things, engage you in conversations that they felt were relevant to them right now, and essentially collaborating with you on solutions that meant something to them, that were goals that they were willing to engage in and participate in. So the central idea is, how do we create relationships with other people who come to us for help? How do we create the most effective relationship that leads them towards the best decisions and therefore more enhanced health? And so what's fascinating to me, Tom, is that your work is exactly parallel to what Bob was doing at that time. They were using microscopes, and they were trying to, through the process of co-discovery, through that process, help people to learn what's actually happening with their body and how their body actually works and how their body is going to respond to various challenges and how certain things are their responsibility, but a dentist can't rescue them from themselves, essentially.
Right. So Dr. Barkley, he enlisted the help of like psychologists. I mean, he reached out to people, right, to create this whole philosophy, didn't he?
Right. He worked with a guy early on. We're talking 62 or 63. He started working with a guy named Nate Cohen Jr., who had a PhD in educational psychology. And he said, he basically said to Bob, he said, Bob, the way you communicate, the way you attempt to educate people is completely the opposite of the way people learn. It's the most ineffective way of doing that I've ever seen. And what was Bob doing? He was doing exactly what we were all taught in dental school. Okay. And Nate said, because Nate had never been in dental school, he hadn't been brainwashed and he didn't have that perspective. And he said, Bob, do you realize how ineffective the method you use is at educating people and getting them to change their perspective and therefore make better decisions? And Bob was just dumbfounded. And so that led over a number of years, it led him to refine and significantly change the way he worked with people, slow it down, make sure that everything that he was doing was relevant to the person at that moment, all kinds of little ways of approaching that. He also worked with a guy named Avram King, who had a degree in social psychology. He worked with a number of other people, PhD level people, who really understood human communication and how people learn and how to structure organizations really in a more ideal way, so that every time they engage with new people, that it's a positive experience and it leads to more effective learning and therefore better outcomes. And nothing that I'm mentioning here involves manipulation or pressure or coercion or anything like that. It's all, there was a gentleman named Wilson Southam that was involved in dentistry. I don't know if you're familiar with him, Tom. But he used to call this type of practice the volitional practice model, meaning people enter it voluntarily, they engage it voluntarily, they come and they go based on the alignment of what they want and what they value with the purpose of the practice. And in fact, he would even say everybody that comes into the practice is really just a guest or a visitor in the beginning. And it's not until they don't become a patient of the practice until they buy in philosophically with your purpose. So that might be on day one, that might be 2 years after day one. But all along you're working on developing them and helping them understand the value of your practice philosophy to the point where they may make a full buy-in. Hence, that's the moment that you start, the comprehensive treatment planning process, only when they understand the value of that. And so it's those little points of discernment that make all the difference in the world. As dentists, we get ourselves in a position where we're trying to pitch things or sell things or using our positional authority to get people to say yes to things that we understand. We see them as valuable. But the person is so far behind us in their understanding the value of that, they just shut down and they think that we're just trying to sell them something that's useless to them, or they'd rather spend it on something else. So it's all about how to develop more effective relationships with people that empower other people to make better decisions.
Well, your postings on Facebook are solid gold, and that's where I came across you. And I told you, I said, what we're trying to do is to get into a more like-minded, because I don't think you have the traction on Facebook that you should have. That audience is just too general, and you're going to be around some people that really appreciate your wisdom. And I so appreciate your historic view and valuing history, because that's another thing that's not happening now that I'm unhappy about, is that we don't go back to our founders and, who made me a good dentist? Well, I didn't just fall out of the sky. I attribute the people that came before me, and you have too. And I value that a lot. I also look forward to having, we're having an event in Nashville in a couple of weeks, and going forward, I want to work with you and your group, and let's do something together. So welcome to the study club, and thank you so much for agreeing to participate.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm excited about the opportunity.
Good.